Hello everyone, my name is Divya. Welcome to History Lessons. So today we are going to do this very interesting topic, cultural developments under the Mughals, in which we are covering architecture, painting, garden, literature. Okay, so it will be a very interesting video. Now, if we talk about all the developments that took place into the Mughals, the Mughal emperors were very fond of art. Under their patronage, all arts, particularly architecture, painting, and music, made special progress, and all kinds of artists used to receive encouragement from state. Aurangzeb was the Mughal emperor who considered it more creditable to finish art altogether instead of encouraging it. So in reality, he was completely deficient in the natural inclination towards art. Otherwise, all other Mughal emperors exhibited a particular tendency towards the development of art and tried their utmost to advance it. Now, if we talk about the architecture, the Mughal emperors were great builders, and that is why the Mughal period is also called the golden age of architecture in the Indian history. The Mughal rulers were very fond of building, great mansions. The mansions built by them astonish many visitors even today, owing to their vastness, durability, beauty, and delicacy. Now, Mughal architecture was a mixture of various influences. Okay, that was like foreign, Indian, Muslim, and Hindu. Babur and Humayun had a great liking for the Persian style, but by the passage of time during the reign of Akbar, some Indian elements got blended in it. While in the time of his successors, slowly, the Persian style was altogether abandoned, and the Mughal style entirely became Indian. Hence, any particular style cannot be designated as the Mughal style because, there was a great difference between the ratio of influences during the reign of different monarchs. Architectural development in the period of, in the period stretching from the rule of Babur to Aurangzeb, will be discussed. Okay. Now we talk about the, Babur. He built two mosques, one at Kabuli Bagh in Panipat and the other at Sambhal in Rohilkhand. Humayun, the architectural highlights of his reign were like he laid the foundation of the city Deen Panah at Delhi, and Humayun's tomb is also called the prototype of Taj Mahal. It has a double dome of marble, while the central dome is octagonal. It was built by his widow Haji Begum. Akbar, there are a lot of architectural development that took place during the reign of Akbar. Architectural highlight of his reign were like building, which were built by Akbars. They were like Agra Fort in 1565, Lahore Palace in 1572, Fatehpur Sikri, Buland Darwaja, and Allahabad Fort in 1583. Now, the architecture at Fatehpur Sikri is an excellent blending of Persian, Central Asian, and various Indian, that is Bengal and Gujarat styles. It is also known as epic poem in red sandstones. Indian tradition includes steep caves, balconies, and casks. Central Asian style is evident in the use of glazed blue tiles. Two unusual buildings at Fatehpur Sikri are Panch Mahal and Diwani Khas. The Panch Mahal has the plan of Buddhist Vihara. Now, the Jodhabai's palace, that is the Jodhabai Palace in Diwani Am and Diwani Khas, are Indian in their plan. Buland Darwaza, which was basically built after Gujarat victory, in 1572, formed the main entrance to Fatehpur Sikri. It is built in the Iranian style of half-dome portal. Okay, and there are other tombs like Salim Chishti tomb, which was redone in marble by Jahangir, is the first Mughal building in pure marble. Then we have palaces of Birbal, Anup Talao, Maryam Mahal are also inside the Fatehpur Sikri. Akbar also built Jahangiri Mahal in Agra Fort according to Hindu design based on Man Mandir. Then we have Harun Minar, a tower built by Akbar in memory of his elephant Harun. He also began to build his own tomb at Sikandra, which was later completed by Jahangir. Now, Jahangir, if we talk about the Jahangir, then the style of architecture used by both Jahangir and Shah Jahan is known as Indo-Persian. Important features of this style are curved lines, bulbous dome, foliated arcs, vigorous use of marble instead of red sandstone, and use of pietra dura for decorative purposes. Noor Jahan, the wife of Jahangir, she built Itmad Uddaulas, which was another name of Mirza Ghias Beg, marble tomb at Agra, which is noticeable for the first use of pietra dura. Floral designs made up of semi-precious stones. Okay, so pietra dura is basically a technique. So, and Jahangir also built Moti Masjid in Lahore and his own Muslim at Shahadra, that is Lahore. He also changed the plan of Akbar's tomb at Sikandra. It is an unusual tomb as it is not surmounted by a dome and built on the model of a Buddhist pagoda. Shah Jahan, he was the most prolific and magnificent builder. Mosque building activity reached its climax in Taj Mahal at Agra. Ustad Isa was the master architect under whose guidance the Taj Mahal was designed and constructed in Agra. Its construction took 22 years. He also built the Jama Masjid on sandstone in Delhi. Some of the important buildings built by Shah Jahan at Agra are Moti Masjid, only mosque of marble, and then Khas Mahal, Masuman Burj, which was basically a Jasmine Palace, where he spent his last years in captivity, and Sheesh Mahal with mosaic glasses on walls and ceilings. Many stone buildings were destroyed by him and replaced by marble. He also laid the foundations of Shahjahanabad in 1637, where he built the Red Fort and Takht-e-Taus, which was Peacock Throne. Most richly ornamented building in Red Fort was the Diwan-e-Khas or Rang Mahal. Shah Jahan also built Nahr-e-Faiz. If we talk about Aurangzeb, then the architectural highlight of his reign were he only built the only building built by Aurangzeb in the Red Fort is Moti Masjid. Okay, and only monument associated with Aurangzeb is Bibi Ka Maqbara, which is the tomb of his wife Rabia-ud-Dawla in Aurangabad. He also built a Badshahi Mosque in Lahore, so not very interesting, but yeah. So these are the architectures. If we talk about the gardens that were built by them, then the laying out of the beautiful gardens was a special contribution of the Mughals. The Noor-e-Afsa in Agra was laid by the founder of the Mughal rule, Babur. Jahangir is famous for the Shalimar Garden at Srinagar. Noor Jahan's brother Asaf Khan laid out the famous Nisat Bagh. And in fact, the garden and the gateway can be found in almost all Mughal style tombs, right? Paintings, the Mughal art of painting, like the Mughal architecture, was the outcome of many influences. So in the beginning, during the reign of Babur and Humayun, it was affected altogether by the Persian influence. During the reign of Akbar, the policy of religious toleration and the mutual feelings of friendship between Hindus and Muslims deeply affected the art of painting also. And in this way, it became an admixture of the Persian and the Indian influences. Thus, slowly and slowly, the Persian influence began to decrease. So much that in the reign of Jahangir, this art became really Indian and the Persian influence on it was insignificant. So, if we talk about the highlights of the Mughal paintings, so these were the Mughals introduced new themes depicting the court, battle scenes, and the chase and added new colors, that is peacock blue and Indian red. Humayun had taken into his service two master painters, Mir Sayyid Ali and Abd Samad. These two painters were ordered to paint the famous Dastani Amir Hamza. Basavan, Daswanath, Haribans, Abd Samad, and Farooq Beg were the famous painters in Akbar's court. Apart from illustrating Persian books of fables, Hamzanama, the painters illustrated Razmanama, which was Mahabharata, and Akbarnama. Under Akbar, European painting was introduced at the court by the Portuguese priests. Now, Jahangir, he was very much into art. So, during his period, purely Indian style of painting developed. Portrait painting reached a climax during Jahangir. Aga Raja, Muhammad Nadir, Muhammad Murad, Manohar, Vishan Das, and Govardhan were famous painters during Jahangir. Now, besides the Mughal painting, there grew up in this age two more school of paintings that were Rajput school of painting and the Kangarai school of painting. Now, the Rajput school of painting was developed in Rajputana, particularly Jaipur, in the 18th century. In it, familiar and popular themes have been taken, and an effort has been made to show or depict an ordinary citizen, his religious rites and amusements. Religion and art are very closely related to each other in it, and the spiritual themes have a special importance in this school of painting. Now, towards the end of the 18th century, another kind of painting was developed in North India, particularly Kangara, which was also known as Kangarai school of painting. Now, the theme relates to Hindu gods and goddesses in this art. Many subjects were selected from the Hindu religious books like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the Ramala, Gita Govinda, etc. And they were depicted beautifully in pictures. Similarly, beautiful paintings of Shiva Parvati, Radha Krishna, etc. were produced. So that was about the paintings. Now, if we talk about the music, we are not going to, talk much about music, but little that we should know that the Mughal kings, except Aurangzeb, had a great attachment with music. However, it was due to Akbar's interest and patronage of this art that both kinds of music, instrumental and vocal, made unusual achievement in his time. In his time, the national Indian music took its birth by the blending of Hindus and the Muslim types of music. Akbar extended patronage to singers like Tansen, Baiju, Pavara, Abdus Rahim Khan Khana, Raja Bhagwan Das, and Raja Mahan Singh. Shah Jahan had patronized many singers of these. Jagannath, Janardhan Bhatt, Ramdas, Mahapatra, etc. were particularly famous. It is said that once Shah Jahan was so pleased with the singing of Jagannath that the royal poet of who was the royal poet of Sanskrit, that he weighted him against gold and gave him the whole of his gold as a prize. Okay. Now the main part of this video is literature. If we talk about literature, the Mughals have a great patronage to literature, Persian, Hindi and Sanskrit. During the Mughal period, Persian was the state language and therefore most of the literatures, prose, poetry, history were written in this language. Babur's autobiography, Tuzuk-e-Baburi, written in Turkish, is an invaluable gem of literature. In it, Babur has described each event and subject in a very interesting way and in a simple language without exaggeration. Humayun's sister, Gulbadan Begum, she was a well-educated woman who wrote Humayun Nama. Though Akbar was himself illiterate, yet encouraged the production of literature very much. He was the patron of many scholars, poets, and historians. As a result of it, literature made wonderful progress in his time. The Persian literature produced in his reign can be divided into three parts: historical books, translated books, and the original literary books. In the reign of Akbar, many famous books of different languages were translated into Persian and a separate translation department, which was opened during his reign. Now, this work of translation was entrusted to many learned scholars such as Abdul Rahim Khane Khana, Badauni, Abul Fazl Faizi, Naqib Khan, Ibrahim Sarhindi. Some of the famous Sanskrit works which were translated into Persian during Akbar, like Ramayana, which was translated by Badauni, I guess. Then Lilavati, which was translated into Persian by Faizi. Then we have Atharva Veda, translated by Hazi Ibrahim Sarhindi. Mahabharata was translated and it was renamed as Razmnama. Jahangir, he also maintained a large number of writers and poets at his court. For example, Mirza Ghiaz Beg, Naqib Khan, Mutamid Khan, Yamtullah, Abdul Haq Talvi, etc. were especially prominent. In Shah Jahan's reign, important historical works were produced such as Pashanama, Shahjahanama, and Alami Sali Dara. Shah Jahan's eldest son was the greatest literary and learned man of that time. He compiled several philosophical books like Mazmu'a ul Bahrain, Safnat ul Ulya, etc. Not only this, but he also translated very important Sanskrit works into Persian such as the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and Yog Vasishtha. During Aurangzeb's reign, many historical books were written, though compilation of such books was prohibited by law. Like Hindi literature, Malik Muhammad Jaisi wrote a poetical composition, Padmavat, on Padmani, the Queen of Mewar, in 1540. This composition has an exalted place in Hindi literature. Akbar's reign was the golden age of the Hindi poetry because it was in his time that some Hindi poets of immortal fame such as Tulsidas, Surdas, Meera, Rahim, and Ras Khan lived. The greatest Hindi poet of Akbar's time was Sant Tulsidas, whose name has been rendered immortal forever by his most renowned book, the Ramcharitmanas. Surdas was elucidated in a very beautiful words of Brij Bhasha in his book, Sursagar, the childhood of Lord Krishna, and the true love of Krishna and Radha. Keshav Das was another noted poet of this age who was the author of several books such as Kavi Priya, Ramchandrika, Rasik Priya, Alankari, Manjari, etc. During the Shah Jahan period, great poets like Sundar, Senapati, Bhusan, and Bihari lived who wrote very good books. Sundar wrote a book named Sundar Shingar, in 1634. Shah Jahan decorated him with distinctions of Kavi Raj and Mahakavi. Also, in Hindi literature, we have like Ramanuja, who wrote Brahma Sutra, Jayadeva, who wrote Gita Govinda, Vijnashwara, who wrote Mitakshara, Jimuta Vana, who wrote Daya Bhaga, Chand Bardoi, who wrote Prithviraj Raso. Then we have J.C., who wrote Padmavat, and Salibhadra, who wrote Bharata Bahuoli. Sanskrit literature. Akbar was the first Mughal monarch who patronized Sanskrit as well as Hindi. During his reign, many Hindi writers were also writers of Sanskrit. In his time, the first Sanskrit-Persian dictionary named Parsi Prakash was compiled. Jahangir too extended a royal patronage to Sanskrit writers and kept them in his court. Jagannath Pandit, Kavindracharya Saraswati, and Vedangacharya were famous writers of his court. Jagannath was the royal poet of Sanskrit in Shah Jahan's court. Now, there are major books. There are a lot of books of the Mughal era. Some of these books and their authors are like this, like Tuzu-ke-Baburi, written by Babur, Humayun Nama, written by Khawand Amir, Danun-e Humayun,
written by Gulbadan Begum, Akbarnama, written by Sheikh Abdul Fazil, Tabaqat-e written by Khwaja Nizamuddin, Ahmed Baksh, Muntakhwat ul Tariq, written by Abdul Qadir Badauni, Tuzuke Jahangiri by Jahangir, Tariq Elsi by Mullah Daud, Masnavi Nala-e Daman by Faizi, Iqbal Nama-e Jahangiri by Muhammad Khan, Chachar Chaman by Chandra Bhan Brahman, Pasha Nama by Abdul Hamid Lahori, Alami Shalhi by Muhammad Salih, Majmua ul Bahrain by Dara Shikoh, Alamgir Nama by Munsi Mirza Muhammad Qazin, Masir Alamgiri by Shaki Musta'id Khan, Ene Akbari by Abul Fazl, Muntakhab ul Tariq by Badauni, Futuat-e Alamgiri by Ishwar Das, Nuksa-e Dilkusha by Bhim Sen, Kulashat ul Tariq by Suzanne Rai Khatri. If you guys like this video, then please comment down below, subscribe the channel. Thank you.